You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Sports fans, welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with a really interesting baseball story. Do you remember about 10 years ago when Deadspin leaked all the Astros trade requests? Specifically, Bud Norris was mentioned, Ichiro Suzuki was mentioned. It was a crazy story. This story is similar. That, of course, is Kevin Mather's comments to the Bellevue Breakfast Rotary Club on February 5th. Up until yesterday, Mather was the president/CEO of the Mariners. He resigned yesterday. Something tells me he would have been fired if he didn't resign, but whatever. Basically, what happened was he made some incredibly candid comments to the Rotary Club that were really bad looks for the Mariners. I mean, I'll go through his comments piecemeal, but for God's sake, you've got to know when to keep your mouth shut. Like I said, the best way to approach this is to tell you one of his comments and then respond to it. Because if I batch it, it won't have the same impact. The first comments he made were about Julio Rodriguez and Hisashi Iwakuma. Rodriguez is a superstar prospect for the Mariners. He's on the cover of the Baseball America Prospect Handbook for this year. Integral part of the Mariners' future. And Iwakuma, obviously, former Mariner, spent 6 years there, made an all-star team. Good pitcher. He basically chastised Rodriguez and Iwakuma for having trouble with the English language. I don't want to call anyone racist, but if nothing else, it's xenophobic to talk about their language skills. They're not native English speakers. That's okay. Suck it up and pay for the interpreter. Mather didn't like paying for an interpreter for Iwakuma. Who the hell cares? I'm sure you did it for Ichiro. I mean, if you want to say we'd like them to learn English, it'll make them easier to relate to in the community, I can understand that, but the way Mather said it was so incredibly wrong. Basically insinuating that these guys aren't trying to learn English, begrudging them for not picking it up right away. Terrible things to say, really. And by the way, a big thank you to MLB Trade Rumors for outlining Mather's terrible comments. They are an invaluable resource. Mather also made some interesting comments about service time. A really hot button issue. It's something that the Players Association has gone after for a long time. They're gonna address it in the coming CBA negotiations. It's a really hot button issue. Mather intimated that Jared Kelenic and Logan Gilbert, very highly regarded prospects for the Mariners, are being kept in the minors because the Mariners don't want to start their service time clock. As you know, the less service time you have, the further away you are from free agency, and we've seen teams manipulate service times before. The Cubs did it with Chris Bryant. So Mather basically implied that there's no good reason to keep these guys in the minors except to manipulate their service time, even though they are completely ready to play Major League Baseball. They won't get that opportunity because we want to have control over them for as long as possible. Like I said, this is a really hot button issue. You can't blame the Mariners for manipulating service time. A lot of other teams do it, but it is really unethical. You have guys in the minors that you know can help you, but you're not going to give them the chance. Because you don't want them to reach free agency 1 year prior. You will hurt your team's chances of winning. That is service time manipulation. And that is wrong. The Players Association has a legitimate argument for why this is a terrible thing. And it's also interesting with Kelenic, if you read between the lines, Mather said that Kelenic was offered a similar deal to the one that Evan White got. Evan White signed a big contract with the Mariners before he had established himself in the majors. Hell, before he had even played a game in the majors, he signed this contract. 6 years, $24 million, 3 team options, the max value, $55.5 million. White made the opening day roster last year. Kelenic probably won't, because he turned down that contract. See, that's the thing. Because you're not willing to lock yourself in long term, we're going to punish you by sending you down to the minors. That is so wrong. I mean, that seems like a labor violation. If you're not going to sign this contract, we're going to demote you. I'm not a labor attorney, But that sounds like a labor violation. I mean, Kalenic really can't do anything. How does that look before you've even played a game in the majors? You're filing a labor dispute. Yeah, that's not going to work. But something tells me the Players Association will look into it. Now, the question that you should be asking yourself is, what can we do to fix it? Service time manipulation is a huge issue. It's something that needs to be corrected. This is my idea, and I've had this idea for a while. I just never had the opportunity to share it on this show. The inspiration comes from the Ontario Hockey League. And it actually started with John Tavares. Not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but basically what happened was Tavares petitioned the OHL to allow him to be drafted 1 year before he was eligible to. At the time, you couldn't be drafted if you were under the age of 15. Tavares was 14. The OHL let him in. They introduced an exceptional player clause. So because Tavares was so great, the OHL bent over backwards to let him in. And this has happened since with other players. Aaron Ekblad, Connor McDavid, Sean Day, Joe Veleno, and Shane Wright. My idea is to do that for baseball. Basically, set up a commission with former front office members and independent scouts like the ones for Baseball America, ESPN, The Athletic, whatever. Set up a committee with those guys and they'll determine which prospects really don't need any more time in the minors. They're ready to go now. So let's say that committee determined that Kalenic didn't need any more time in the minors. He'd be designated an exceptional player, or whatever terminology you want to use. His service time clock would start regardless of whether you have him in the minors or not. And yes, if the guy has a bad spring training, you can petition the committee to revise its opinion. But if there's a prospect that you have who's so great that needs no more time in the minors, you shouldn't be rewarded for having him in the minors. You're going to try to manipulate his service time? Boom, he's an exceptional player. His clock will start regardless. I really think that's the best way to solve this. I'd love to know what you think about it. I never do this, but seriously. This is a call to action. Let me know what you think. Tweet at me, @RealJacobValk. I've never seen this idea before. There were a couple other things that Mather said. They're not as earth-shattering, but I'll go through them anyway. Mather said that the Mariners were taking the position that players without contracts would reach out to the Mariners and be willing to sign at a value that was less than what they originally wanted. It's a smart strategy. It worked. It got the Mariners James Paxton. The thing is, you just don't say it, you stupid, stupid fool. Just don't say it, man. Yes, as we get closer to opening day, players will be willing to take less money. But you don't say it. The players are going to hate you. The union's going to hate you. Oh my God, just keep your mouth shut. Who said that this guy could speak at the Rotary Club? I mean, seriously. You've got to wonder why no one else was sent from the Mariners. The last thing is something really sad. Mather said that there's a high level of distrust between the league and the union, and he's worried about what the future has in store. I agree with him. I'm worried about what the future has in store. The notion that the union distrusts the league, yeah, that's probably true. I mean, bear in mind, the CBA is set to expire on December 1st. Do you really trust these two parties to get together and in 9 months work out all the differences they have? This is a league that forced a 60-game season down everyone's throats. This is a league that wanted to push the season back. And it's led by someone who may be the worst commissioner baseball has ever had. Yeah. We're in for a tough CBA negotiation. I hate to use this word. I really do. But I think there's going to be a lockout. And a long one, too. One that costs us games. It's not what I want, obviously, but I'm just being realistic. I don't see how these two parties get together and agree on a CBA. These guys can't agree on anything. I foresee a really long lockout in 2022. Moving on now to the Diamondbacks reuniting with an old friend. That is Tyler Clippard, who just signed a 1-year deal with the team worth $2.25 million. In 2016, Clippard pitched in 40 games for the Diamondbacks. He was traded to the Yankees. Wasn't anything special. That actually marked his second time with the Yankees. He came up with the Yankees. Was traded to the Nationals for Jonathan Albaladejo. With the Nationals, Clippard made 2 All-Star teams. Way to go, Cashman. In all seriousness, this is a good move for the Diamondbacks. Clippard is a really good reliever. Solid setup guy. And he has closing experience. In 2012, he had 32 saves for the Nationals. Last year for the Twins, he went 2-1 with a 2.77 ERA. In 2019 for the Indians, he went 1-0 with a 2.9 ERA. The Diamondbacks really don't have a great bullpen. Obviously, last year they traded Archie Bradley. Junior Guerra is now with the Angels. They have a couple good relievers, Stefan Crichton and Kaori Maya. But no one's going to be mistaking either one of them for Byung Kim anytime soon. I understand that the Diamondbacks signed Joakim Soria. That was a good move. And Clippard is a good move too. The front end of the Diamondbacks bullpen is fine, but the back end is really, really bad. I don't see the Diamondbacks making much noise this year. Alright, now I'll give you some NFL Valk talk. And the Eagles released another veteran wide receiver. First it was Deshaun Jackson. Now it's Alshon Jeffrey. And you can't have any problems with this move. This was in the cards for a while. Jeffrey has been an Eagle for 4 years. In his 4 years, his number of games played has decreased every year. 2017, he played a full season. 2018, 13 games. 2019, 10 games. 2020, 7 games, while only starting 2. He had 6 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown. Now, I will say, the 6 catches for 115 yards equates to 19.2 yards a catch. That's actually really impressive. That's the highest yards per catch Jeffrey has ever had in a season, and it's not even close. Jeffrey will land on his feet. He'll sign a 1-year prove-it deal. The Packers would make some sense. But his days of being great are probably over. I will say this, though. The Eagles need to make a big investment in their wide receivers. If Jalen Hurts or whoever's under center for the Eagles is going to have any chance of being successful, the Eagles need to add at least 2 really good wide receivers. Moving on now to the Jaguars being set to decline their option on Tyler Eifert. He was set to make just under $5 million this coming season. And I don't hate this move for the Jaguars, but I don't love it. Tyler Eifert has talent. In 2015, he made the Pro Bowl. It looked like him and Andy Dalton and A.J. Green were going to lead the Bengals to the promised land. But Eifert just kept getting hurt and hurt and hurt. Now, last year for the Jaguars, he wasn't bad. 36 catches for 349 yards and 2 touchdowns. But obviously that's a far cry from Eifert's Pro Bowl season, where he had 52 catches for 615 yards and 13 touchdowns. The days of Tyler Eifert being a game changer are dead and gone. The one thing I'll say is recently Eifert has stayed healthy. Last year he played in 15 games. And in 2019 he played in 16 games. That was his last year with the Bengals. So I'm not sure how crazy I am over this move. Can you do better than Tyler Eifert? The answer is yes. But Eifert's not bad. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. The Jaguars now need to add a tight end. That's not the end of the world or anything. They have the cap space necessary to do that. In fact, it wouldn't even surprise me if they circled back to Eifert on a cheaper deal. But as of this very moment, it's hard for me to fully endorse this move. Moving on now to the Texans, bringing back Dontrell Hilliard on a 1-year deal worth $1.25 million. And yeah, this may have caught some people off guard because Hilliard really didn't do much last year. He only had 10 touches for 50 yards. He played in 5 games for the Browns and 2 games for the Texans. Obviously didn't make much of an impression, but Hilliard's not a bad player. He's a very good pass-catching running back. In his career, this guy has 22 catches for just under 200 yards. He's also not a bad goal line back. In 2019 for the Browns, he had 13 carries. 2 of them went for touchdowns. Dontrell Hilliard can be the third-string running back for the Texans next year. This is a good move. I understand it's not earth-shattering or anything, but it makes sense. Alright, now I'll give you some college basketball Valk talk. And I'll start with the really, really good overtime game that we had yesterday between Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. This was really a back-and-forth affair. Neither team could really pull away. You had really talented players going at it. Mac McClung going up against Cade Cunningham. Isaac Likely going up against Terrence Shannon. Avery Anderson going up against Kevin McCullough. Marcus Santos Silva going up against Caleb Boone. Make no mistake about it, this was one of the best college basketball games of the year. Now, Texas Tech did have an opportunity to win this game. They were up by 1 at the half, 37-36. 6.5 minutes into the second half, Oklahoma State hadn't scored. They missed their first 9 shots of the half, but Texas Tech was only up 9. This is a tough loss for Texas Tech. Even though Oklahoma State's a good team, they should make the big dance. Texas Tech was still the ranked team. They had an opportunity to win. They just couldn't take advantage of it. I'm sure that Chris Beard had a tough time falling asleep last night. Now, I do just want to say one thing about Cunningham. For a while, it seemed like he was going to be the first overall pick. Like lock, stock, and barrel, take it to the bank. Now, he has some competition. Guys like Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga, Evan Mobley, and Jalen Suggs are all making strong cases to be the first overall pick. Now, I'll say this. I still think Cunningham should be the first overall pick. At this very moment, it's Cunningham. But it's not as ironclad as it once was. I think this is shaping up to be a really good NBA draft. We've got some really talented prospects in it. Alright, now it's time to preview Kansas versus Texas. I've spoken about these teams before. On Friday's show, I correctly said that Kansas would beat Texas Tech. Then again, I incorrectly said that Texas would beat WVU. Although the one thing I'll say is that was a really close game. It was a 2-point game. I had a tough time picking either team to win. I said WVU had a good chance of winning. I didn't lose any sleep over that. I'm not going to spend too much time going through each team because nothing has changed from Friday to today. Kansas seems to be rounding into form. They have a really talented starting lineup. Okai Agbaji, David McCormick, Jalen Wilson, Christian Braun, and Marcus Garrett. Meanwhile, you take a look at Texas. It's the same thing. Andrew Jones, Courtney Ramey, Matt Coleman, Greg Brown, and Jericho Sims. Sims is the obvious weak link, though. I will say that. As much as I like Kansas this year, and I do think they can go on a big run, Texas has something that Kansas doesn't. And it's something that's going to hurt the Jayhawks in the big dance. The Longhorns have a solid sixth man in Kai Jones. Kansas just doesn't have that guy. The Jayhawks are vulnerable to a team with a good bench. Texas does have a solid bench anchored by a really good sixth man in Jones. This game is in Texas. I like their offense more than I like Kansas's offense. Hook 'em. I do want to talk about a really sad death in the sports world. It's one that's flown under the radar, and it really shouldn't have. That, of course, is Doug Wilkerson, who died on Sunday at the age of 73. His death was announced yesterday. When you think of those really, really, really good Chargers teams of the late 70s to early 80s, who are the first guys that pop into your head? Dan Fouts, Kellen Winslow, Charlie Joyner, Chuck Muncie, and Don Coryell, right? Well, you forgot the guys who were blocking for him. And there was no better offensive lineman on the Chargers than Doug Wilkerson. Wilkerson came out of a small school, North Carolina Central, and this was before the draft became what it is right now, where you had these guys coming out of small schools regularly. So when Wilkerson was picked by the Houston Oilers with the 14th overall pick of the 1970 NFL draft, it raised a few eyebrows. Now, Wilkerson had a terrible rookie year. Only played in 9 games, didn't start any of them. He really struggled to find a role with the Oilers. After the season, he was traded to the Chargers for Willie Frazier, who was a really good tight end in the AFL. But Frazier's best days were behind him. He really didn't do much in the NFL. Meanwhile, Wilkerson was just getting started. In 71, Wilkerson started every game for the Chargers. That would start a trend that lasted throughout his career. After his rookie season, Doug Wilkerson started every game that he played in. He played in 195 games for the Chargers and started every one of them. When you think of the best offensive linemen of the 70s to the mid-80s, you probably think of guys like John Hanna, Ron Yary, Larry Little, Bob Kuchenberg, Art Shell, Mike Webster, etc., etc. It would take you a while to get to Wilkerson. It shouldn't. Of all the offensive linemen, from 1971 to 1984, Wilkerson has the fourth highest approximate value according to StatHead.com. And let me tell you, he was an integral part of those Air Coryell teams. When Coryell took over for Tommy Prothro midway through the 1978 season, the Chargers were not a good offensive team. Coryell whipped these guys into shape, and in the playoff years, 1979 to 1982, Wilkerson was there for all of them. The Chargers offense finished no worse than fourth in points per game and no worse than fifth in yards per game. I didn't know this. Thank you, Wikipedia. Dan Fouts was so appreciative of his offensive line that the night before every game, he'd buy him dinner. Unfortunately for Wilkerson, the Chargers really couldn't get over the hump in the playoffs. In 79, they got upset by the Oilers in the divisional round, 17-14. The year after that, they lost to the Raiders in the AFC title game, 34-27. The year after that, after Kellen Winslow had a Herculean performance, 13 catches for 166 yards and a touchdown. He blocked a field goal to send the game into overtime. For 30 years, his yardage total was the playoff record for tight ends. And obviously the iconic image of him being helped off the field by his teammates after the Chargers beat the Dolphins 41-38. It's one of the best playoff games in NFL history. But the Chargers followed that up by getting steamrolled by the Bengals 27-7. The year after that, the Dolphins would get their revenge on the Chargers by beating them in the divisional round 34-13. And then we all know what happened after that. The A.J. Dewey game. I'm telling you, he's still going. And then the Redskins won the Super Bowl. Wilkerson was there for all of it. From 1980 to 1982, he was a Pro Bowler. In 1979 and 1980, he made second-team All-Pro. In 1982, he made first-team All-Pro. He made the Chargers' 40th and 50th anniversary teams. He's also in the Chargers Hall of Fame. And you know what? I'll say this. He has a real argument for being a Hall of Famer. If not the Hall of Fame, then definitely the Professional Football Researchers Association's Hall of Very Good. And I have a good relationship with them. I hope they're listening. May Doug Wilkerson rest in peace. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that I get in a wind-up and make something up as I go along.